what are general mistakes new players and GMs make when starting out with L5R? What are the must-knows for players and GMs? This came from Doji Misho on Discord. And how deep do they have to delve into the lore before starting?
That is a big question. I think they're kind of two separate things, like the general mistakes for players and GMs, and how deep. Because I have to say, one of the strengths of L5R and one of its weaknesses is the amount and the depth of the lore, because it's fantastic and there's loads of stuff in there and it's all amazing, but it can be very, very intimidating for a new player. So that's a thing.
Okay, maybe what we can do is for our next session is start a new series with introducing some of the kind of mandatory lore for Rokugan and all of the clans, kind of pre the beginning of 5th edition. That would be it. And we can talk about that too, because I think, the founding of the empire, so you get the basic structure.
Yep.
And a basic knowledge of each of the clans. And if you have the empire and you have the clans, really, I think that's as deep as you need to go. You don't need to know everything. You need to know the foundings of them and kind of the background for each family. And once you have that,
you find out the rest as you go.
Right. The rest are things that GMs can bring in as they tie to different elements of the storyline that the GM is producing. So you might not care at all about the Bloodspeaker Wars and Ichiban until you're taking a tour of his tomb. And then you really care a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's not necessarily anything to do with the gameplay for a current plot. So it's not required that you know everything, just the founding of the empire and the clans.
I think in terms of general mistakes, I think that expecting the players to know as much about the lore and especially etiquette as their characters is one I hear of a lot. Because you don't expect your players to be as good at kenjutsu as their characters. And you don't say, well, if you want to hit the monster, demonstrate a sword cut, or I'm not going to let your character hit. You don't do that. That would seem a bit silly. But it is very often like, I need to know exactly, you need to say out loud what your character says out loud. And if you get the details wrong, then your character said that and your character's ashamed themselves.
I don't like gotcha moments from GMs in general. So if you, as a GM, you want to set it up in L5R, especially in something where the role-playing does have dangerous consequences. It's not you versus your player. You're making a story together. If the players can fail at role-playing things. Absolutely. You want to have that in there. But it should be something where you've set it up so that they have a general idea of what to do. Yeah. And if something you think is really going to devastate them, my GM always likes to use "Are you sure you want to do that?" And if you hear "Are you sure you want to do that?" that means stop, really reassess, maybe take it up and discuss it with the rest of the party before you go on and say yes. And sometimes saying yes is the right thing, but most of the time you need to think twice at that point.
And I think as a GM, you do need to be a bit more conscious of what's workable, what's not. And certainly you're the GM, you're going to be deciding and defining what's good and what. You need to be able to let the player say, look, I'm trying to be polite here. And you don't got to go, yes, but you didn't refuse that gift twice, therefore, seppuku for you. If the player is saying, I'm trying to be polite, I'm going to accept the gift in a polite way, then you would say, well, obviously you go through the proper ritual of refusing it twice to show that you're giving them the opportunity to show they're sincere and you're showing how humble you are, and then you accept it, as opposed to you didn't do the thing you couldn't have known, but your character would have known, and things like that. I think that's a common mistake that happens. And I personally think, one of probably the biggest mistake, not having a good session zero, where you establish what are the boundaries. There's a lot of stuff you should do with like how people, the actual players will interact with each other and stuff like that, and ground rules. But also just in terms of, this is what I'm expecting your with regards to characters and politeness, and here is how I expect you to tell me how polite your character is being. Mm-hmm. And here is some expectations. Rokugan is a very polite society, and politeness is terribly important. And you should take that into account when you are role-playing. But if you say polite things in an English way, or whatever your local language is, I'm not expecting you to know the suffixes like the san and the sama and all that. That's fine. I will accept sir and madam and lord, because that's going to tell me what you're going for. But, this is an important part. You should know this and be aware. But here is how here's how you tell me what you're doing without breaking everything. You set the expectations.
Right. Another common mistake in this one is that players often make, but should be established in a session 0, is this is not Dungeons & Dragons. You need to trust that the GM is going to take care of you. 2, you need to trust that you're not going to have to loot everything. And it's not about the race to either experience points or treasure, anything like that. L5R is different from other role-playing games in that the story, it's not competing for prizes. Your money is no good. You're not allowed to touch the dead body anyway. They do a lot of things to discourage you from thinking about this in terms of loot. And that is a big mistake. I see a lot of brand new players come in from other avenues of gaming is that they're interested in the same things that Dungeons & Dragons naturally, looting the bodies and wrecking up the XP. And it really can't be that way for L5R, because if you play it with that and must go and disturb the game for everybody else it's going to drive your GM crazy.
Yep. Which is not to say bad things about D&D, but D&D is very much its own thing, and Legend of the Five Rings is something very different, which is part of the fun. So I think that is a very good point. You need to come to it as a player with quite a different kind of viewpoint.